Ever since it came out, people have been asking me my opinion about 1917, that new World War I movie that came out not too long ago now. And I must say that, well, sitting here now and making this video leaves me fairly upset. Primarily because me being here means that I'm not going to be able to go out and watch the movie for a third time tonight. This was an extraordinary film. One of the first things that I said to my friend after watching the film, I turned to him and I say, that was a work of art. That was a piece of art, something like that. I don't watch a lot of movies, is the thing. I probably step into a movie theater like 4 times a year at most, if it's a good year, and I watched this movie twice. 2 days in a row, in fact. Once with friends and then once on my own, largely in preparation for making this video. I wanted to kind of make sure that all the hype I had was legitimate, so to say. Sort of watch it with fresh eyes to see it. Does it really still hold? Is it still a good movie? It's still a good movie. Oh my god, it was a good movie. It was a very, very good movie. And I'd like in this video to talk about exactly what made it so incredible and such an authentic feeling portrayal of the First World War. And of course, on another front, an accurate portrayal of the First World War, and also, I think, an accurate portrayal of just warfare in general, all sorts of different time periods. But we'll get to all of that soon enough. And in the first part of this review, I'd like to talk about pedantic little details. And as I do so, I'm going to swap helmets, I think, or swap my helmet for a assault cap, just because this is going to be an awful lot more comfortable, I think, during the course of this entire review. There we are. Much more comfortable. Now, so talking a little bit about those pedantic little details. Obviously, that's something that I particularly look for. In fact, while watching this film, I was even going so far as to, at least the second time I was watching it, I was even going so far as to count every individual round that was being fired to make sure that they weren't going with that old trope of, unlimited ammunition in a bolt-action rifle, that kind of thing. And I must say, overall, I was very, very impressed. I'm sure that when the DVD version of this film comes out, or the digital version, whatever you want to call it, and I'm able to watch it, in the comfort of my own home, more frame by frame, I'll probably be able to find things here and there, like, that guy is wearing that patch wrong, or his helmet's incorrect there, or the footing, things like that. There's going to be those little details that are always wrong, always going to be the case. Nothing is perfect. Honestly, having watched the film twice, the first time in full IMAX, just being blown away by the immersion of it all, which we'll get to that soon enough, and then the second time watching it on a smaller screen and more, trying to pick out those little details, things like counting every individual shot being fired, I must say, I was very, very impressed by it. And my friends were all the more blown away that I had, nothing negative to say about the film. There was one thing that did sort of stick out to me, and that was how 2 of the main characters were wearing their gas mask bags. Now, generally speaking, I have a video all about the small box respirator on this YouTube channel, talking about how you wear it, how it goes over the head, things like that. But suffice to say for now, the gas mask bag is usually worn in the front of the chest, very, very high up to where it's like right here, more or less. You want the gas mask to be very, very close to your face, so that way, if there is a gas attack, you can flip the helmet off, pull the mask out, put it over your head, helmet back on, and you're good to go. The respirator is stored inside the bag, and it's very, close by to your person. At least whenever you're on the front line, that's absolutely where you want to have it. Having it anywhere else is probably going to be a very bad idea. And in the film, while many of the actual soldiers did this, the 2 main characters actually wore, for the majority of the film, their gas mask bags on their back, which is not very authentic. I don't think that I've ever seen it that way. Rather, again, if you're on the front, if you're sort of like in an enemy territory, you have it in the front. And if you're not that way, you'll actually have the gas mask bag sort of slung over a shoulder and kept on the side, more, out of the way. I've never seen anything historically of soldiers carrying it on their back. I'm sure it could have happened once or twice, but it's not the standard. And if you're going, again, into a hostile situation, as they do in the film, that's not a spoiler, they find Germans in the film at one point or other, you want to have that gas mask bag very, very close by. Now, a friend of mine suggested that this may have been because they wanted to make sure that nothing exposed the characters, covered up the characters' faces. not entirely sure that I buy that, but it's not the worst problem is the thing. It's a very small issue. And as well, that gas mask bag was being worn over top of the webbing or the belting, like with the cartridge pouches on either side, the bayonet, your canteen, things like that. The gas mask bag was actually worn first over top of that. There is a scene where one of the characters takes off some belting and he takes off his gas mask bag and then he undoes the webbing. Whereas the gas mask bag always goes on first and then the webbing over top of that, and I'll show a picture of that here, again, making it all the more harder for that gas mask bag to be basically like uprooted or moving around. You want that to be as stationary, as stiff, as firm on your body as possible so that you have ready access to it. Other than that, again, I really didn't find anything in particular that was wrong. I mean, the uniform quality all looked really good. The badges and the patches, which incidentally I still don't have them. I need to buy like a Dorset's badge for my epaulet there. Overall, like the patches and whatnot for different divisions, different ranks, that all looked pretty good. My familiarity with exactly what kind they should have been is not entirely there, but at the very least, they had the patches, so I'm going to assume that they did well on that front. The way that most of the soldiers were wearing their uniforms was really good. The way they were wearing their helmets or soft caps, things like that, it all looked very, very authentic. And actually, if we want to go back to that count of the gas mask bag, even that still kind of impressed me because there's one particular shot where you can see the gas mask bag on the guy's back very, very clearly. And despite the fact that they didn't really have to do this detail, they just needed to have the bag in order for it to look right, they actually had a gas mask inside of the bag because you can see the hose, the tubing of the actual the respirator system, you could see it kind of like poking through the fabric. You can see the texture, that ribbing of that tube. There was actually a gas mask inside of that bag, which is not anything that they really had to do. They could have just stuffed it with, paper or something like that to be like, oh, look, it's a full bag. Bing, bang, boom. That's what a lot of films probably do, just to make things look good when they don't actually have the substance behind it. But they did even that. Things like where the soldiers were carrying their mess tins. There's never a part in the film where they need to like undo their mess tin and show like, oh, this is a mess tin. This is what it does. But still, it's not necessary for the plot, but the soldiers, on their small packs, they have the right kind of like backpack, so to say, the mess tin is carried underneath that pack in the way that they would have done it. Rain capes are stored in the way that many soldiers would have stored their rain capes on their kit. Even something so specific, actually, in the very beginning of the movie, obviously, the guys, they load a clip of ammunition, as you may expect. One of the guns, one of the rifles, which is, again, the film was set in 1917. This is actually a 1917 rifle. It has a magazine cutoff on the rifle. They weren't very common by 1917, but, I mean, this rifle is proof that they did exist. So good on them even on that count. There's one point when, of course, he opens it up, and he puts the stripper clip in and he shoves the rounds down as appropriate. None of this, there's one scene a friend told me afterwards in Our World War, an old BBC show, which I thought was pretty good. But there is a scene where one of the soldiers loads his ammunition in the magazine itself and then, slams it underneath all, and then, slams it underneath all Hollywood style, slam it underneath the bottom. No, it's a top loading piece. You put the stripper clip on there and then you shove the rounds down, and then you can, seal the piece shut. They do that appropriately, and the thing is that before he does that, he actually, this gets a little, there we go. He actually reaches down to his rifle, and with his thumb, he flips open, there we go, he flips open the magazine cutoff, which is like, wow, that's a good level of detail right there. You see him flip it open, and then after he loads the rounds in, shuts the magazine, or shuts the bolt, then he flips the safety back, back forward. I think he flips it forward. I think it's back, and I think you see him flip this thing forward so that way the gun can actually fire. But again, just like the attention to detail, and it's not emphasized. It's just happening in the background as two of the characters are having a conversation. And the one guy in the back is loading his gun, and you see him go through those 1, 2, 3 steps to make sure that his rifle is ready to fire. it's spectacular. You know, you can tell either that the actors are you know, used to, or they've used these kinds of things before, or at the very least someone showed them the ropes on, hey, here's how you carry this rifle, here's how you know, operate the bolt mechanism, things like that. Of course, the actual working of the bolt, the cycling, you know, those guys were going nice and quick. It looked really, really good. You know, as I see reenactors doing in the trenches in Newville and whatnot all the time. Even the way that they carried the rifles was pretty good. There was none of this whole, you know, like going around like this all at the low ready. You know, they were carrying their rifles at more of like a high port for the most part, or like at a trailing position. They were carrying it in what at least really felt like a more period-appropriate kind of way. Yes, I must say, for the pedantic little details, I was very, very impressed. But from those more pedantic level details, I think it's going to be important that we sort of look out a little bit more and talk about the bigger picture items in the film, how it's actually portraying a particular time period, whether or not it respects the overall history that it is using for its storytelling here. And again, I think the answer is absolutely yes, it does. This is a very, very authentic feeling film for the First World War. And in order to really cover that, it's actually going to be very important as well to talk about some of the technical aspects of the film, which of course many people have been lauding the technical aspect of the movie. One of the first things that really struck me when I was sitting in the theater watching it is just how immersive the movie really felt. Because it was all single shot, or at least it's filmed to look like a single shot, so there's no like hard cuts, there's no like, oh, do you think we should go over the top? I don't think we should go over the top. Oh, but we have to go over the top. It was nothing like that. It was all, you know, the camera panning around between conversations and whatnot as appropriate, all like it was one take, as it were. It wasn't all one take. There were multiple, you know, shots, but it was very, very well disguised. Things like, you know, the camera might like move behind a gun and then pop back up over the other side, or it might like go up to the sky and then back down. You know, things like that that you can see. Oh, okay, that's where they made a cut to the film and did another take for something. But overall, you know, it was very, very well done. It felt very, very seamless. You can never actually spot, oh, that's definitely where they did one. It's really just more a matter of like, I think they did a cut there. They probably did a cut there, but you can't tell. Technically, it's a marvelous, spectacular achievement. But that's very important for the overall feeling of the film. Speaking with some other friends who were watching the movie, I was not the only one who really felt like you were there. Like you're in the trench with the people from the very beginning of the film. You know, one of my friends told me that like he found himself like clenching his fist and having to relax himself purposefully. I myself, I had to like regulate my breathing throughout, because I realized half the time that I was like catching my breath. Like you're having like a physical reaction to this film. Another friend said to me that like she was feeling a bit sick at one point during the film, and she noticed this because the camera was shaking ever so slightly, giving that disjointed sort of like discomforting kind of feeling, for like sort of like a motion sickness type thing. It did very, very well at that. And one of the biggest aspects of making the film really feel immediate, like you were there with the characters, is not only that use of the single take. So you're just another guy's perspective, you know, going through this area. It feels very personal in that way. But also, I think the overall set design was spectacular. Again, having been to some incredible like World War I reenactments with trench lines and whatnot, looking through it all, it felt weirdly familiar in a way. You know, seeing the signs saying, you know, trench, you know, this trench is that way, this building is over that way, things like that. The overall, you know, design of the mud and of the wooden walls and of the, you know, walkways, things like that, it all looked very, very authentic. And you can imagine how painstaking it must have been to design this whole thing, considering that it was all filmed in like one solid take style. Would have been very, very difficult to make sure that everyone on the set is doing exactly what they have to be doing at exactly the right kind of time. The coordination is incredible. And a little detail that really told me, wow, they paid attention to how all of this stuff works very early on in the film, and told me that this is going to be good, was actually when two of the characters are in a bit of a hurry because they receive some orders and they have to do something very quickly. Again, time is the enemy is the slogan of the film, so I don't think we're spoiling anything there. But they're having to move quickly, and they're moving through the trenches to a particular point so that they can do a thing. And they're in such a rush that they're kind of hurrying through the lines, and they start. There's like a trench line between two trenches. They start moving down the way and bumping into a number of people. And one guy looks back. He says, "Oi, you effing something or other! You're going up the down trench." Just like, "Sorry, orders," and then they pass on through. That level of detail is extraordinary. They're going up a down trench. Now, a lot of people may wonder, what's that supposed to mean? But it's because, of course, trench systems and these fortifications, these defensive lines, were built like massive roadmaps in a way. You have things like your communication trenches and your movement trenches, sort of to get between from post to post, spot to spot. And certain trenches would be marked as, oh, on this one you go down the trench, and on this other one you go up the trench. That way, if there's an emergency situation, you need to get people to medical care, you're not having people run up against one another in these very narrow alleyways, but they can facilitate like roads of traffic moving up and down. They even paid attention to that kind of thing and used this little throwaway line, but to put in not only a sense of tension, a sense of realism, but also to throw in some historical information that people may not have thought about before. You're going up the down trench. What are you doing, buddy? Another thing that they did really well, I think, at capturing an essence that people don't often think about is actually through the use of the barbed wire and how they show barbed wire. There are a number of parts of scenes where individuals are having to move through large clumps of wire. And it really showed just how dense, how deadly, how devastating that stuff could be. Showing, corpses and wire, showing men trying to maneuver through it all, and how insanely difficult that would have been. If you're interested in that topic in particular, I have an old video, very old video from way back when, where I talk exactly about barbed wire in the First World War and what made it so horrific. But suffice to say, the way that they portrayed it, it wasn't just, as in many films, like a couple of little strings across the ground that makes you wonder, why is that such a big deal? Why don't they just go over it? But no, in fact, the characters are having to find actual pathways through the wire. Like before they go they go into this section, they ask an officer, and he's like, "Oh yeah, if you go over through this way and past that, look for all these landmarks, and you'll find a path through the wire. There's a small gap over there that you should be able to make your way through." And you can see how they have to pick out a very narrow pathway through this wire, and how easy it is to get entangled in it all. And again, the use of the one-shot camera really helps to emphasize that, because it gets really deep in there, showing that just, mesh of wire. And then as well, there's sections where they see the wires blown apart by artillery and whatnot, and you see exactly how significant that is through a number, again, of very of ways that I don't want to spoil, but you see how important it is to find avenues of exploration and whatnot through things like barbed wire, and how you really can't just go over top of it unless you have some sort of means to do so. The portrayal of barbed wire was excellent. And then, of course, in a similar capacity, you have the portrayal of no man's land itself. That space between the two trenches where, no man is able to go because you'll get killed for it. From beginning to end, in the scenes where they're in that kind of area, you feel, it feels like a horror film. It feels, honestly, like a sci-fi horror movie. That's what I said to one of my friends after the fact, is that felt almost like a science fiction film, because it was that alien of a landscape that they really capture, that almost lunar landscape of shell holes and wire and corpses and dead animals and all these different things. It feels almost alien, and of course it feels horrifying because you know where they are, so to say. But also the way that they actually, regardless of the fact that oh, that's no man's land, that's terrifying, the body language of the actors was so good at reinforcing that fact that they are not meant to be there. That is not a place that you're supposed to go. They weren't just sauntering across like, oh, look at all these bodies, that's pretty dangerous, but hey, Bill, whatever. No, they were showing through their acting just how uncomfortable the whole situation was. And the use of the music and then the use of all these other little details really helped to, again, reinforce that aspect in the person's mind, the viewer. It made you feel very uncomfortable. And beyond talking about body language and how it really reinforces that, I'd like to talk more about that, but I don't want to talk about it too much lest I spoil that experience for you. So I'm going to talk a bit more about this in the next part of things. But suffice to say for now that the way, again, technically speaking, that the camera angles worked really helped to make the film feel so very, very authentic to you. It uses a combination, the film does, of very narrow, very, very claustrophobic kind of shots where you're very deep in, personal with the characters as they're moving around and navigating these very, shall we say, tight positions. And then it sort of juxtaposes that. It changes things up occasionally. It combines those sorts of shots with these massive, very, very wide angle, very, very big sky kind of immense shots of incredible scale. Again, the coordination of all the extras and everything kind of speaks to, all the more credit to the film. They use these massive, incredible shots to, again, give you a very particular physical, indeed mental reaction to those scenes. And when the film wants you to feel claustrophobic and uncomfortable, indeed, if you suffer from claustrophobia, be aware that that may be a problem for you. It does it very well. It makes you feel that uncomfortableness, that dust in the air, like you can't breathe, things like that. It does that very well. And then, on the other side, when the film wants you to feel exposed, like you're out in the open and you're not okay with this because you're completely open to the enemy and that sort of thing, to the horror of whatever might be out there in the wilderness, it makes you feel that immensely well as well. And along a very similar lines, if the film wants you to feel a sense of peace, of comfort, a sudden comfort that is jarring to the senses because of how everything else has been, it does that immensely well too. And of course, again, I won't talk about it too much because it's all very spoilery, but when the film wants you to feel emotional and again, personal with the characters, it does so beautifully. I had tears in my eyes 3 or 4 times, I think, throughout the film. And then, of course, if I'm not rambling on enough, we come to the actual story. Now, from a lot of people, I had heard that this was the most disappointing aspect of the film, was the actual storyline, saying it wasn't terribly inspired, so to say. And I definitely see where people are coming from that. It wasn't particularly original, so to say. It's kind of like the same general kind of story, even if it is based off of a true story, which I've heard. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's the kind of adventure that we've seen before, so to say. Here's a message, deliver it over there, that's it, and you're going through dangerous areas to get to the one spot. Get there in time or bad things will happen, that kind of thing. Not terribly well inspired. But all the same, I think the way that they showed the story was very, very good. That was the biggest complaint that I heard from the film. Although many of those people still said that they really enjoyed it, they just didn't like that one aspect. And for my own part, I must say that generally speaking, I do not enjoy stories that focus on the extraordinary. If I'm watching a movie about, say, the American War of Independence, I don't want to see Mel Gibson running around as some super soldier, tomahawking entire platoons of enemy soldiers and, saving the day single-handedly through his heroism. I don't care about that. Nor am I particularly inclined, if I'm reading a book about the war, I don't want to read a biography about General Washington and how, oh yes, on April 15th of 1778, I moved my division from this area to that area. Or, I don't care about General Haig sitting in his office saying, oh yes, we'll move this brigade over this way, and then we'll move this other division over here, and the 5th Army will attack at this time. I don't really care as much about the extraordinary things, or the peculiar things. In the same way that, if there's some, movie about World War I, I don't want to see a story about the one soldier who's going on some miraculous grand adventure and saves the day through it all in some very peculiar, very out-of-whack sort of circumstance. If I'm playing a video game about World War I I don't want to be given a semi-automatic or even fully automatic firearm. I don't want to be given body armor and save the day as some super soldier. I want to be given a simple, basic bolt-action rifle, a tin helmet on my head, and said, all right, you're part of the third wave. Go and get them. You are just like 100 other people. Nothing special about you. You are the ordinary. If I'm watching a movie, I want to see a movie about that guy. If I'm, reading a book, I want to read a book about that guy. As a person who is primarily interested in military history through a social lens, and obviously with the reenactment that really leads into this, I'm much more interested in the ordinary, in the common experience, sort of what it was like for the average person, for what it was like for everyone on the ground, instead of those rare exceptions. I think that is, from an educational point of view, and as well from a narrative point of view, the most compelling and the most effective way of really getting across a sense of what a particular time period was all about. You're not going to learn an awful lot about the American War of Independence by watching The Patriots, but you will learn an awful lot about the genuine struggle of Continental soldiers by reading Joseph Plum Martin. That kind of principle. I think you get the point. Now, that being said, this movie is about something extraordinary. It's not about just some random private in a part of a much larger offensive that's much bigger than him, and about his struggle and his difficulties, his privations. It's not about that. It's about two men, for the most part, who are having to go on something very, very extraordinary, something very, very unusual, and that is referenced and that is respected in the film. From a very, very early stage, they acknowledge, guys, you are doing something that is outside of the norm, and that's kind of the whole shtick. Which at first I was thinking like, well, I'll look past all that. I'll look past the fact that I don't really like the overall story because the material culture is being portrayed so well. But I must say, I actually kind of prefer it the way that they did it. The way that they did this film is yes, it's an extraordinary story, but using that extraordinary story, they managed to showcase, even if for very brief moments, but they managed to showcase so many unextraordinary, so many common aspects of the time period. They show, because it's one man kind of moving through a wide variety of areas, a wide variety of aesthetics, so to say, you get to see all these different, kinds of areas. You get to see a destroyed city and the effect of prolonged conflict and German occupation in a settled environment. You get to see that. You get to see no man's land and the devastating impact of an age-old front, so to say, being worn down by artillery and corpses and all that kind of. You get to see that. You get to see the reserve trenches and the communications trenches, and you get to see that behind-the-scenes aspect. You even get to see forward positions. You get to see sort of like, non-front line, but like, shall we say, moving a front line up kind of thing. Like, you get to see a whole bunch of different aspects of the conflict in a very holistic fashion, because it is this smaller group's journey through these various aspects. And I think if you're going to do a story like this, that's the way to do it. Because I felt like it still showed the common experience for the soldier very, very well. It showed the entirety of the war, but in microcosm. And along a similar line of having this film sort of represent various aspects of the conflict, but all in microcosm, it really speaks, I think, to the overall name of the film and how it's really quite appropriate. It's in a way that I didn't think of to start off with. When I first saw the name 1917, I thought, it's going to be, like all the other World War I movies, it's going to be more of an action flick than anything else. And yet, now, looking back on that title, having seen the film in retrospect, I realize 1917. It's only one little sliver of a much wider conflict. And you realize after watching this entire film, the entire film takes place over the course of a couple of hours. Again, it's all sort of like condensed through various tricks. Certain shots are actually are meant to reflect a much longer amount of time than what's being shown on the camera, and you can sort of see that as you're watching the movie. Like the time span of the film is much longer than the actual movie itself, because again, it's all in single shots. So movie is 2 hours, but it's showing like 8 hours or something like that, which you'll see when you watch the movie. But the course of this, couple of hours, the course of this short span of time, all of these incredible, these extraordinary, these horrifying, genuinely horrifying, all these stressful things happen to the extent, again, that it makes you as a viewer feel anxious and sick and nervous through the entire thing and emotional. And at the end of it all, you realize, oh, wait, this was just a little bit of the war. This was only a very small part. There's another year and a half, I think, of conflict, even longer, in fact, after this film that is still to be had. All of these conclusions, the climaxes of the characters that make it through and everything, you realize there is still an exceedingly solid chance that they are still maimed or killed by the end of it all. They don't necessarily make it out. In fact, some of the wounds that are sustained throughout the film, it's very possible that he doesn't make it out at all from that experience. And then, of course, you realize as well that there was a number of years of all of this same kind of thing happening well before the movie. That the movie is not showing an entire conflict. It's showing merely one small aspect of a few people's experiences of it. And because the film shows those few characters moving through the war, like in microcosm, again, I think it really brings out that character, that sense of scale, how immense it all was, and how beyond our individual control it was very, very well. Many of the shots with the effect of, again, the different camera angles, all being one shot, very, again, claustrophobic, very, very wide angle shots, and as well some of the atmospheric designs, things like haze and fog, fire, smoke, flare lights, things like that. It all lends a sort of dreamlike aspect to the film. It makes it look more like a dreamscape in many of the individual scenes, as opposed to a very solid, like, oh, okay, they're over there kind of absolute sense. It reminds me in a way much more of films like Apocalypse Now in that kind of way, as opposed to films like, say, Waterloo or Band of Brothers and whatnot. You watch a film like Waterloo or a miniseries like Band of Brothers, and you can kind of tell what's going on like a tactical level. And things make sense as a result of that. It's all very logical. Oh, okay, the French artillery is exposed, and so the British cavalry is charging in to take it, but then the French lancers countercharge them, and then, the Coldstream Guard are defending Hougoumont, and then the French light infantry are attacking them, and that's a tactical position over here, and you get, like, a sense of everything that's going on, and it's very big picture. It's very, very, very war movie-like in that way. A film like, something like Band of Brothers, it's very, there's the, those like tactical decisions being made that you're there to experience, and you can sort of see, like, okay, those guys are going around that corner to outflank them over there. There's a German machine gun nest over that way. There's a sniper in the back, and then a Tiger tank is coming around the corner, but thankfully they have an anti-tank gun. That kind of thing. It's not that kind of war movie. If you're looking for an experience to show you like how they fought in World War I explicitly, like more documentary-like, it's not necessarily to be found here. Rather, again, the entire film takes on sort of like a stream of consciousness kind of feeling to it. Sometimes things happen which don't entirely make sense, so to say. Like a character will be walking along and something happens to him that feels very sudden. It feels very random. It feels very, very chaotic. And again, it makes you feel like you don't have a grasp on what's happening, what's going to happen next. A friend of mine put it to me that more often than not, he doesn't like chase sequences in films because they're kind of samey and predictable and whatnot. It's not that kind of experience. The chase scenes, they, as he said, kept him on edge the entire time, wondering what was going to happen and how horrifying it all was. Because it follows this dreamlike stream of consciousness kind of experience, I think it's much more akin to something like Catch-22, maybe. Obviously, Catch-22 is a comedy. This is not a comedy. But this sort of like things are nonsensical. Things are happening seemingly at random. There's a lot of confusion. At numerous points throughout the film, he's having to ask, like, oh, where is your commanding officer? Where's the superior officer? And I'm like, I don't know. Over there. No, he's over there. He's over there. He's over there. And like half the movie is just him trying to find people that he has to talk to. Again, all of that, the fact that you don't know what's going on, you are confused, and it feeds into that overall sense that you are there. You are experiencing this with the people. You do not have at any point, I don't think, at any point, do you, the viewer, have knowledge that the players, that the characters, that the protagonists do not have. You are not watching an adventure, you are on the adventure. You are not watching a war movie, you are in a war. And that is what makes this film so good, so something that I get so passionate about. Again, maybe when I go through and watch the movie scene by scene, much later on, in like a year from now, I'll find more problems that I have with it. But for now, I tried. I went to see it twice, the second time with the explicit purpose of finding things that I did not like. And I couldn't, is the thing. I like this movie a lot. I like this movie a great deal. It wasn't even really as much of like a historical movie. There was very little in terms of like, there was no like pre-screen of like, in 1914, the Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated, causing a string of events which ultimately led to the largest conflict. None of that. There was no like, the generals talking like, but Haig is ordering an offensive over here. Yes, but we have to do an offensive over here. And there's none of that. There was no high-minded, military history being sent down. There was no lecturing being done. There was no, like, there wasn't even the, like, insulting presence of, like, a newbie character, like, oh, hey, I'm a rookie. I don't know what's going on. So that the other characters could be like, oi, get your head down. Never put your head above the parapet. Don't you know the Germans are over there? Which is basically just saying to people who don't know anything about World War I, hey, the trench warfare is a thing. There was no like, oh no, how do I fix my bayonet? And then another character showing, oh, here's how you fix your bayonet in order to show the character. Nothing like that. And yet, despite the fact that the film had nothing like that, it managed to get across a great deal, I think, of educational value. Oi, you're going up the down trench. Oh, there are lanes of communication, lanes of transportation in these trenches. We're on the front line now, and you can tell, like, when they're moving over to the front line for the first time, there's a very different atmosphere from, like, the mess area and where soldiers are receiving mail and whatnot between when they go and they cross over to a frontline area and they say that word, we're on the front line now, and you immediately feel through the film itself passively telling us exactly how something has changed, and through the body language of the characters and whatnot, just how dangerous an area like No Man's Land, for example, is. This film is chock full of history and of educational value, but it's all passive. All of it is passive, and that is a genius way of getting it all across without hitting you over the head with it. And of course, in that way, it's entertaining as well. It's teaching people without them knowing that they're being taught something, much like a reenactment. They go for the battle, but they get a lot of education while they're there all the same. This film is proof, I dare say, that to those people who say, oh, Brandon, the movie can't be terribly historically accurate because it has to sell. It's not supposed to be educational. It's just supposed to make profit. That's BS is what it is, because this movie shows you can have an educational film that is immensely entertaining, that is so good, gets nothing but positive reviews, at least from people who know what they're talking about. Have I gotten the point across? Have I covered that I like this movie? I think that I've done well more than get across the point that I kind of like this movie. I think it's pretty good. I like it. Oh, I'm running out of battery, in fact. I think I've been going on for so long. Hey everyone, so as it turns out, I ran out of battery, or at least I am running out of battery, so the whole spoiler section of the video, that's gonna have to be later on, not gonna be in the same video. I do apologize. We'll make a second video later on talking about some more particular aspects of the film with the spoilers and everything, because there are some good elements to talk about there as well. Also, something I wanted to announce in this video, but I didn't get the chance to, down below in the description you will find details for, I now have a P.O. box, so if you want to send things to me. I don't know why you... Bye-bye. I am and I shall remain your most humble and obedient...
Grit and Stag has always stood for justice. Grit and Hope has always been for peace. Grit and the foes have known that they could trust us to do our best to make the cannon cease. Grit and blood will never stand for insult. Grit and song will rally at her call. Grit and pride will never let her exult, but we'll never let the old flag fall. We'll never let the old flag fall, for we love it the best of all. We don't want to fight to show our might, but when we start, we'll fight, fight, fight in peace.